give a fuck when you land or not. Just let him go. Don't worry, you're gonna be a shitty fight, but you gotta let punches go. Last round. You can't wait until again. If you miss it, fight it, go right back. And don't take 30 seconds to start another fight. I'm the best ever. There's never been anybody better. I'm Sonny Liston, I'm Jack Dippy. There's no one like I'm from Airport. There's no one that can match me. My style is impeccable. My defense is impregnable. Look at that. Look at that combination.
I kept telling you, no punch. He couldn't hit. He's swinging like a sissy. He's missing. Let me see you bust. I hadn't started dancing yet. Like the wind is hurt. Sensational first down and Purdy gets hurt. Purdy got done. I go and send early in the round. Great first round. Incredible. Perhaps one of the best in middleweight history.
Hey, that black guy, he hit hard.
Bang, 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 bang.
Fire.
What's going on, my boxing public? Welcome again to another episode of Hands of Fire Boxing Talk. I'm your host, writer and reporter for RealCombatMedia.com, G.Alé Dampier, and I'm joined by a good friend and I wouldn't necessarily say colleague, but I mean, you never know what the future beholds. But Mr. Michael Wilson with Pound for Pound Boxing Podcast. Welcome back. This is your second or third appearance?
Maybe second or third one of them. I'm not sure, but thanks for having me on, brother.
Yeah, not a problem. I'm always glad to have more voices on the podcast. I know people are tired of just hearing my solo monotone voice, you know what I mean? But, you know, it's not like, I guess you bring much variation, I guess, on baritone, but I guess that doesn't matter. It's just more or less the information that we bring to the podcast.
Right. It's the information and content that matters more than anything else. So.
Absolutely. No gimmicks. And today, I mean, there's no gimmicks about today, man. I mean, we got quite a week that we've had for boxing. I mean, let alone just the weekend's fight. Santa Cruz winning a unanimous decision over Rivera. Matters to be expected. But one thing that wasn't expected: Tyson Fury signing with Top Rank and Bob Arum at ESPN for an $80 million deal. We're going to talk about that and pretty much what that creates pretty much for the heavyweight division and what that means pretty much for the Tyson, well, not only Tyson Fury, but Deontay Wilder, Anthony Joshua. Also, we're going to talk about, speaking of Anthony Joshua, his presser with Jarrell Miller took place in New York. Got a little feisty, got a little physical, and some pretty good media events took place following after, with some appearances on the Breakfast Club and Sway in the morning. So we learned some pretty good things there, and at least Mikey actually got some latest things on the Jarrell Miller interview, who was on Sway. So we'll talk a little bit on that too, and just on final topics alone, we'll just freehand a little bit. Mike will pick out whatever he would like to talk about. My particular topic will be on AJ's treatment necessarily, and his main criticism, which I always find a pretty interesting topic to talk about. So all in all, a pretty decent and let's say substantive episode today. So let's just jump right into pretty much what everyone's going to already want to talk about, is the Tyson Fury signing with Bob Arum's Top Rank and ESPN, plus more or less the $80 million deal. This is going to be for 3 fights. And right away, now the funny thing I at least noted, at least what I found interesting about it, is because before I actually found out that this deal took place, I did see Billy Joe Saunders with Frank Warren, who they both share their promoter with, and I noticed that they were at least mentioning about him having a new BT deal where he's going to be coming back and fighting at super middleweight. So, and I didn't necessarily know that this was all the same event. So at least I did find that at least pretty cool. But at least now with Tyson Fury signing over now here in the United States, it does create a opportunity for him, at least for a launching pad, to create a name. But my question really, when that took place, though, was that necessarily needed? Is he the one who needed the American exposure? And what does that American exposure now lead to, given that he's already fought the WBC champion?
Well, when you look at it, George, in the aftermath of Wilder's draw with Fury, there were as many folks talking about how Fury got up from that knockdown in the 12th round and how he conducted himself after the fight. That gained him a lot of positive feedback from the American media, in particular. I mean, the memes and the gifs that you saw from him rising up from the dead, Undertaker style.
Yes, I've shared a few of those.
Right. So I when I look at it, for me, it's not a question necessarily of did he need that American market. For me, he just kind of piggybacking on the feedback that he got from the U.S. boxing fan base and really the sports fan base following up that performance against Wilder, because he was being spoken about both in the ring and out of the ring just as much, if not more, than Deontay Wilder. So, from my perspective, it's a smart move on his part. Um, you know how big he is over in the UK. He's just expanding his appeal. Controversial as he may be with some of his commentary, particularly in the past. Let's face it, a lot of American boxing media, we know about it because we're hardcore fans, but a lot of American boxing media do not know about that.
Mm-hmm.
They just know about Fury from what you saw in the build up to the fight with Wilder. And that was largely positive. So he's a personality. You come here, you fight here, you build on that, you up your personality, you up your marketability, you become a name here in the States, and you continue to fight the way he fights. Show the heart at least that he showed in the Wilder fight. Uh, in a sense, it's kind of a win-win.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, if anything, I feel like, yeah, he doesn't. I would say maybe take care of business at home, conquer UK, then go to America. Usually is the route. I guess I wouldn't necessarily say seeding that AJ is that name. I mean, because I feel like he maybe is the more mainstream name. Wilder, I mean, does have a cult following, but that is very, very passionate on their support with him. So I guess it's fair to still make the claim, I guess, to still want to come over. If anything, though, I feel like this deal maybe threatens the most out of those, at least the three, Joshua, Wilder, and Fury. This threatens really the most Deontay Wilder.
I'm so glad you said that, because I've been hearing discussions. Well, it may hurt Joshua. It may freeze him out. No, no. Joshua, who he is, from a worldwide perspective, he is the biggest, most marketable name out there. We have to keep in mind, we still dealing with the Deontay Wilder, whose only real endorsement he has is with Everlast. That's it. While Joshua, he still has money from all over, from brands all around the world. Unfortunate as it may be, Wilder just doesn't have that. And Fury, he brings a worldwide appeal, that Deontay Wilder just does not. And by coming here and making this deal with Arum, it could be conceivable that he could start taking some of the shine because of his personality and the marketability that comes with his mouth. He could take some of that shine from Deontay Wilder. Absolutely.
Yeah, and that's exactly why I say that, the least nail on the head, because Anthony Joshua, like you said, is, I mean, there's I don't know what it is, something about those four belts that kind of just makes you the big deal. You know what I mean? It's kind of hard and undeniable to have that not be the dude, and at least that pretty much be your headstone, really. So And until someone can either break that up or at least either bring them all together, you can't really say nothing to him. But
And you have to. Under Armour is an American-based company, Baltimore, right? Who did they sign? Joshua or Wilder?
funny enough,
And as much as I'm sure we will talk about this later. Over the past 24 hours, what has been trending on Twitter, boxing Twitter especially, his freestyle on Sway in the Morning.
Yeah. So I mean, and like you said, Tyson Fury already has the appeal. He has the story. He has the depression story. He has, the revival of the career, the revival of the fight. Just him coming back, like you mentioned, the memeable and gifable comeback that he did from the knockdown, and these two guys who. Who were all actually the same age. Me, Tyson Fury, and Anthony Joshua, all about like 29, 30 years old. And then you go to Deontay Wilder, who's 33 years old, who's now what I believe. Was he now about 34 fights now in?
40 plus, I think.
40 actually. Yeah, that's right. So, I mean, so if anybody is not necessarily just say losing, but if it definitely puts you on the clock, Deontay Wilder, who is supposedly, a free agent to networks now, and who is now being truly tested on that metal by Bob Arum, who made the offer, who as of at least 6 o'clock Eastern Standard Time, Bob Arum had made the offer for a multi-fight deal, including a rematch with Tyson Fury, to sign with ESPN and Top Rank. So the latest is that his team is still reviewing that. But, I mean, considering that the WBC has also been pushing on this, and pretty much what is really keeping Deontay Wilder, let's be truthful, relevant with this, but considering the performance or lack of performance, should we say, that was performed against Tyson Fury, it's pretty evident that his time may be running short between the two. It's seeming that the bigger fight may be between Joshua and Fury if he doesn't make a move quick.
He could be, for lack of a better word, frozen out, depending on how Arum and Fury wants to play this.
If he loses the title, it's over. He can literally be freezed out, literally just because that title's gone.
Yeah,
there's no reason to fight him.
Yeah.
Because Anthony Joshua fans can say that, you know what, a guy who gets shut out like that against Tyson Fury, well, he was always going to be second best, and it was always going to be fought out between Fury and Anthony Joshua. They can say that then, and literally just totally bypass that whole fight.
Yeah, I think in short, what you're saying, George, is that let's just say Wilder and Fury do fight. Even if Fury loses, he has a pretty prominent future. If Wilder loses, not so bright.
No, I guess in so few words. And speaking of bright futures, Anthony Joshua, who made his his first press conference appearance in the United States, and I believe it was at Madison Square Garden. Actually, yeah, it was in there, because I remember actually their little interview that they did up in the Raptors, which is really cool. I've never seen a little view like that. I don't know if you've seen that on the Zone. There's a little interview that he has kind of like on the highest level in the Madison Square Garden, where you kind of like see all the hanging jerseys and stuff. It looks really cool.
Okay, that part I actually missed.
Yeah, you got to check that out. It looks really dope. Yeah, so I mean, just the summary, if you guys haven't seen the press conference, which, where the fuck have you been if you haven't seen it? I mean, if you're watching this podcast, you haven't seen that, something's a little wrong, but I ain't going to shame you. But if you haven't, basically, it was pretty much what to be expected. Miller continued his barrage of shit talking toward Anthony Joshua, continued to berate him on being a softie, a spoon-fed silver spoon, glamour boy, all of that. He kind of started off his little monologue talking about his struggles, where he came from, how roaches ate before him, all that stuff. And eventually just talked about how he's gonna put in work for the fight. Then Anthony Joshua speaks, and which quite, or at least caught everyone quite off guard. The first thing he stated was, first and foremost, I like to state that Miller's a little bitch, and that he's gonna get knocked the fuck out, without a doubt, quote unquote. And I think like the best reaction is really the guy who was sitting right next to him, the little like a blonde guy. I couldn't sit, like he was sitting right next to his left, and I figured he was, you see his face, he's like, oh yeah. And as soon as he says that, he was like, whoa, okay, this is this is a little different. and I mean, pretty much Anthony Joshua just goes into a barrage of attacks, talking about how he's overweight, drug abuser. He's the heaviest fighter in the heavyweight division, but is the lightest puncher. That he hits like a fairy. I mean, I loved it. This was great. and quite a few other fans did too. I mean, all I seen up and down the comments and all over the groups were how great fans were loving that. AJ was giving out the shit just as much as he was taking into. If anything, seemed to get the better of Miller, because once he stated that he was heavy, or at least a little overweight, Miller said, "Well, your mom's likes my weight," and which then replied, which I think was the line of the night, was, "Well, where's your mother at? I pay her rent now. I'm her landlord, and I came to collect." And with that, I mean, Miller just lost the plot and wanted to just go right over there and knock the shit out of him. it was just really great to see. Mike, tell me your thoughts on the presser.
The line of the night for me was not necessarily that was funny, but this is going to go outside of boxing, and a bit controversial, if you will, when Miller made the joke about Joshua and fish and chips, and Joshua's response is basically saying, I'll take the fish and chips over an orange president with a history of being an abuser. That's just my thing. Because
I missed that one. Damn.
So that was my thing. It was like, okay, he went there.
Yeah.
Scripted is too strong of a word, but I got what I expected from Big Baby. He didn't change off the plan from what we've known from him when he was first introduced to the boxing public. He likes to talk a bit. He's braggadocious. He's a braggart. He likes to talk trash, and he did that. The push was expected because based on the little confrontation they had a few months prior, when I think it was the announcement of Saunders and Andrade, when they were supposed to fight, they had a little bit of confrontation there. Or it may be the thing. I know it was the thing with
the Zone launch.
The Zone thing. Yeah, the Zone USA thing. They had a confrontation there, and you knew that given that Big Baby, which is not he was gonna do something extra coming in, and he did. I was a little bit surprised how at the rhetoric of Joshua, but and we can talk about this later in terms of your kind of like opinion at the end of the show. There are layers to this. There are layers to all of us, and if you get pushed far enough, people have that kind of sides to you. It just depends on who brings it out. So while I was surprised, it was like, okay, when you've been talked about in the way he's been talked about, maybe Joshua's going to go there. But overall, it served its purpose. It was entertaining. It left fans not just boxing fans, but mainstream sports fans talking and serve its purpose. And you're going to have a lot more buzz in the lead up to the fight in June.
Yeah, and the best part about it is that it actually created some type of hope for skeptical fans, which I actually found was pretty funny out of all of that. I was like, it was the best takeout. I was like, oh, well, I hope, Jarrell knocks him the fuck out and da-da-da-da. Yeah, he really is. I was like, okay, all right. So maybe he's not the pushover that everyone kind of was kind of seeming bemoaning about when it was either announced and just being rumored. But yeah, so I mean, and to I don't want to say necessarily wrap things up, but that you did somewhat lead into my last opinion, I guess, for the pod, really, where it just freed up this time. Really, is just more or less talk about whatever.
Let me say this before you go on.
Sure,
the talking and all that was fine. It's like I said, it served its purpose, but the bigger question for me, figuratively and literally, what kind of condition, what kind of shape, what is the weight that Big Baby Miller's going to show up fight time?
And
is he going to continue this trend upward of 300 plus pounds, or is he really going to be serious and get himself in the best shape possible to give himself the best chance possible to score, what many would consider an upset?
And I'm glad you actually stopped me, because that actually reminded me of this, just because of this was, at least last week, it was more or less just the first impressions of the fight when it was at least just being announced. So given Mike, not sure the next time I'll have you here, we may even have you here just for the final recap, just coming up before the fight. But just overall, your first impression and what you may be looking for in this camp that would possibly change your mind in the outcome.
Again, it's just, for me, the weight. I just want to see what kind of condition that Miller is. He really dedicated to being at his best in this fight? If he is at his best, because up to this point he's shown himself to have a good chin, he can take a punch. Because for a big man, he's very active. He throws punches in bunches. He's good at going down to the head and to the body. It's that kind of physical, mental pressure combination that could pose some problems for Joshua, because he's never seen anything like that. That could make things interesting. But if he continues this trend of coming in extra heavy, talking this cheeseburger mess, coming in at 300 plus pounds, he's never dealt with anyone who has the pure power, strength of Joshua. It's one thing to do that against a Dominic or the guys he's fought in his career. This is a whole different proposition from a strength power perspective and a skill perspective against a guy who you've gotten under his skin. And because of that, I would anticipate Joshua being ready. He knows that what Big Baby presents to him. So for me, I want to see what Miller looks like. If he comes ready, he can make things really interesting here. All right, but if he's not,
so let's get to that point. Let's say ideally, Miller gets into ideal condition. He's ready. He's took this serious. He's cut down. He's leaned up a little bit. What threat does he pose from there? What's his chances?
He could overwork Joshua, kind of overwhelm him, if you will, because Joshua, let's face it, there are times where he does kind of fight in lulls. He's a big muscular guy, big muscular guys like that with that kind of American football physique. Sometimes conditioning plays a part. Joshua himself, he can't come in too high, in my opinion, like he did against 250 for Klitschko, 250 plus against Takam. I like to see him more in the 240 range. If Big Baby comes into shape, I think he will go. I think the fight will go the distance. I think he will win rounds, and I think it will be interesting late in the fight. fighting at such a high pace, how Joshua would deal, say rounds 10 through 12.
Okay. All right. Now I'm dropping from ideal just to actual realism. So what do you actually see playing out?
Just Joshua's just too skilled, hits hard, um, just hits too hard, too skilled. I just think the heavy bombardment of punishment over time against the big baby Miller, whose conditioning will probably be questionable because he's talked about he would have to lose. If he loses the weight, doing it so dramatically in one fight, that would affect him. So
Yeah.
even if there's a scenario where he loses a lot of weight, it may catch up to him. Joshua's the favorite. Joshua, if his mind is right, if his body's right, he will win. He will win. I don't know if he'll win by knockout, but he will win. He may get some knockdowns along the way, but he will win.
Yeah, I fairly see it the same way. I like to make my picks more or less once I see the weigh-in, because at least at that point in time I can at least pinpoint exactly how I can see it weighing out. Because then you can see what each fighter trained for, and at least what they're expecting and what their game plan may exactly be. Not necessarily always sure. But like you said, Joshua ideally needs to stay below. I would at least say 245 at the very highest. I don't necessarily like him packing on too much weight because he loses the he loses what's unique about his size in the first place. When he puts on too much weight, which is the fact that he can still move much like a middleweight with that big frame, and he was pretty had decent speed, and still at least continues to when he chooses to. And of course the power is still there too. And I feel like if anything, maybe sometimes he packs the weight on, maybe out of insecurity for power punchers. So maybe we won't necessarily see that. And I would expect not Fury, but AJ to go in there rather disciplined and really looking to get him out of there. Miller may be sturdy enough just for out of his size, just to be a live body in the fight, but I don't see Miller getting out with anything better than a close loss, a close unanimous loss. But yeah, that being said, just going to go into at least the last little opinion here, and then, like I said, Mike, you can take over and speak on whatever you'd like. For me, Anthony Joshua will at least will continue to still be the topic for at least what we were previously on. Pretty much what I took note on ever since really just, I would say, really, I guess since the Klitschko fight, because I felt like everyone loved Anthony Joshua after that fight. Like even his critics, I mean, even like Wilder fans were just high on him. I mean, and necessarily, at least they just gave him the respect at the very least. But within time, and of course, with most champions, and it's always been fabled throughout the famous Rocky stories, where you become champion so long, you're up so high that you forget to, you forget what the actual hustle and bustle it took to actually get there in the first place. And with Anthony Joshua, I don't actually see anything like that. I see a man who's trying to, who at least is taking in this whirlwind of a media storm that he's pretty much is the eye of, and making as precise and level-headed decisions as possible. And for some that may come off, I guess, maybe manufactured and maybe not just genuine at all, but considering, I mean, the alternative and what we've seen other boxers do and how the demeanor is always held and usually criticized for, I found this kind of petulant, really, as an even real reason to actually not like him. And it's actually a true despise of him. People just think he's fake. And And the thing is he's never actually appeared to at least be anything different than what I've seen him in any other footage. Like any footage of him, YouTube on the Saturday night, the Graham Norton show, um, First Take, Sway, Breakfast Club, all of it. He's always been the same dude. I'm not kissing ass. I don't even, like I said, I mean, I still follow Anthony Josh. I wouldn't necessarily call myself the biggest fan, but I just find that the hate for a guy who is doing pretty much what I would figure most of us would try to do, is just really just petty. And I consider what his countrymen of all people give him the most shit about it, and who their alternative of people who they root for, and the Tyson Fury, who credit to him, has overcome his issues, but in the midst of his problems still had the fervent support of these people who were thinking that he could still beat the top likes, even high on coke, and a fucking drunk 250 fucking 1,000-pound binge that he was on. He was fucking huge. Let's just say it. I'm exaggerating, but he was fat as shit. And the fact is that there are still people. Speaking of him in the guards, that he could still just topple Anthony Joshua, just so in a total discreditation to him. And I just find it just weird, just in just all of that dynamic. I mean, you have a guy. Like, it was like the mold of what you would want. Like, this is what here in the United States, what we crave. This is kind of what the type of champion I would want to have, at least for our country. And it's just, it baffles me that he just doesn't necessarily get, the full credit he supports. And it's really just disappointing to see that. And I think fans should probably just do a little bit better on not necessarily always just liking the fighter, but I mean, Jesus Christ. I mean, this is a guy who's at least more than halfway to an undisputed heavyweight championship. So what the hell? That was my take.
Let me piggyback off of what you just said. When you look at Anthony Joshua, he's in a very unique and precarious position in boxing, and in sports, trying his best to be not just the best fighter that he can be, but in sense trying to be a role model and the best person that he can be. I think when you have folks who criticize him, be it the UK or here in the US, because given we're two folks who have shows on YouTube, and within that YouTube community who touches boxing, you have plenty of Anthony Joshua detractors there too. In comparison to Fury, community you get the sense that people feel that Fury, as for lack of a better word, fucked up as he may be at times, is being his authentic best. He's being his authentic self, while Anthony Joshua is not. I differ from that opinion. This is going to be a strange comparison, George, but I look at Joshua and I think, in a certain sense, Russell Wilson, and that the news of Russell Wilson, and this is going outside of boxing here, this is going outside of sports and just entertainment in general, where people will be like, consider Russell Wilson not authentic, particularly in light of what his wife's baby daddy has said about him, questioning his manhood. You've heard others use the word corny in terms of Russell Wilson. And I get the sense from some that's the same depiction you get of one Anthony Joshua. I think that's unfair.
Yeah.
One, two, you can be quote unquote corny and still keep it as real and as thorough as anyone else. I will go here. What do you want? Someone who's trying to be their authentic self and live up to a certain standard, or someone being, or how can I go here without being too controversial, without upsetting too many folks? What do you, I would take a Joshua from that press conference and from what you see from him, be it Sway, be it Charlemagne, be it ESPN, than a certain retired boxer caking for a company who had to apologize for putting blackface clothing out.
Yeah, I mean, there's a certain coattailing you could.
I would take a Joshua, what you see of him on Sway, the freestyle, what you see on Charlemagne, what you see in interviews from him, because I think under there's a realness there with Joshua that people are not recognizing. I would rather see that than that same boxer caping for Gucci having a photo op with a certain man in the White House who's had his fair share of inflammatory rhetoric about people from that former boxer's community.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, and just at least to and back in regards with Joshua, I mean, you see it's not like he's denying any of his past faults or anything bad he's done. It's anything he's at least trying to show at least how to do better than it. But it's almost as if they, like, I've seen some criticism. It's like, oh, they try to act like he I mean, in some fronts it's almost as if he's not street enough. And then there's some extent where it's like, oh, he's just trying to cover it up. He thinks he's all good and good, but he's really this. So it's like, so which narrative is it? You can't have it both ways. Which one is it? And the point is, and when it comes down to it, there isn't one.
It's like folks are trying to move the goalpost on setting the rules on what it is to be authentic. It makes no sense. You would never, you can't win when folks are continually setting a standard here, setting a rule here, setting a certain precedent here of what it is to be.
It's like I said, it's disappointing. And like I said, with it being from the UK, I found it just a little bit even just weirder for that point. And then again, considering the alternative support is the very fault-ridden Tyson Fury, which, I mean, again, maybe he creates that folklore type status because of that, which makes him more likable, I guess, for that reason. But I mean, I don't see why that has to go in spite of Joshua.
Right.
Like, it doesn't. Yeah. None of that really makes sense.
Yeah, there's the UK side that you're talking about, and then there's the US side, and I could go there, but I'm itching to, but I'm not.
And we're the worst
when the criticisms, not just necessarily between Joshua and Fury, but between Joshua and Wilder. And I'm not going to go there, particularly when it comes to certain folks within our community who try to make that comparison, which is to me just the height of it, just the height of just not thinking before you're speaking. But that's another discussion that you and I as two black folks need to have really off the air.
Yeah, I mean, and honestly, there really needs to be an on-air discussion of it, because I don't feel like it's really had enough. I feel like, if anything, some of the darker uh the darker entities of the YouTube sites really have kind of have their say on this, and it's unfortunately it's now driven perspective, unfortunately, in this sport. A lot of just agenda based and just false narratives in this sport, man. Just really unnecessary. I mean, because some of these fights just sell themselves, and some of these
Yes.
fighters sell themselves. So it doesn't even need to even get to this. So whenever we are having to have these stories, it's quite often the time is because the fighter's not compelling themselves, or they have to drudge up something to create that interest. So that being said, I like I said, I don't think I really stated it on
Yeah,
at
and
the time.
it's deeper for me, George, than what we saw, say, 20 years ago, when you had a certain criticism of Lennox Lewis. That was mainly based on the style that he fought. With Joshua now, it seems like it's not just based on how he fights, but who he is and how he acts, and that can touch on some issues that just seems to be just uncomfortable. And again, the rhetoric surrounding why the personal issues that people have with the one Anthony Joshua, be it comparison to Fury, or it's particularly in comparison to Wilder, it's just just
Yeah, it's just like I said, just counterproductive for all parties in the end. Whether you're trying to benefit, whether you're trying to do this out of the benefit for your guy or not. Quite often, it always gets caught where people just try to discredit so much that they end up disvaluing their own opponent. Um, but yeah, I mean, I'll just leave it at that. But I figured we went pretty long on that. I mean, this was your opportunity too, man. I mean, what did you necessarily wanted to bring to light? Anything in particular? Anything rattling in your brain there? Something you want to get out?
um Srisakat saw Rung Vasai and
Oh, you
won.
went for it. Oh, you went for it. No one, not
Francisco
many people will
Estrada
say it.
won. Francisco Estrada fought one of the fights of the year last year. I think a year ago this month, I believe, Rung Vasai defeated Estrada by 12-round majority decision to retain his WBC super flyweight title, part of the Superfly series on HBO. Well, I wrote a story for Three Kings Boxing today that uh, Estrada, who is Rung Vasai's mandatory contender, he will get he will get the rematch that he desires. They're going to fight April 26th in Los Angeles. It's going to be aired on DAZN. As part of that card, Danny Roman fighting TJ Doheny, excuse me, junior featherweight unification bout. Roman WBA champion, Doheny IBF champion. So that fight is going to take place in April. And I'm going to get real nerdy here. I preface this by saying that, George, if you're a real fan of the smaller weight fighters, um, the Mighty Mites, if you will, want to talk about two fighters from Japan. One by the name of Koiguchi, who defeated Heki Butler on the 30th of December to win a belt at 108 pounds at light flyweight. Immediately after that win, he called for a unification bout against his countryman Kenshiro, who won the WBC version of the junior flyweight title. Recently, at an event in Japan, Kenshiro said that gave details for his plans for the year, and he said to end the year he would like a fight with Koiguchi. So we may well see a unification bout down at 108 pounds between Kenshiro and Koiguchi. So just a bit of a note there for those who are really into the Mighty Mites, if you will.
Oh yeah, I know a particular fan of our, at least our lower Japanese featherweight fighters, early bantamweight fighters too. And yeah, I was taking a look here. I'm sorry, it was WBA and lineal, huh? Okay.
Yes.
Yeah,
And
so
then another note, Arthur Bertibiev, he's fighting a fighter by the name of Sven Furling in May, which has caused a bit of reaction, a bit of trolling, including from some fellow fighters within his division.
yes.
That fight is going to happen. So yeah.
Still been Barrero, at least with his has a more famous tweet than the actual opponent, which damn shame on that one. But yeah, definitely good stuff there, Mike. And also a little reminder: this weekend, James DeGale will be taking on Chris Eubank Jr. in the O2 Arena. This will be caught live on ITV in the UK. I believe we can catch it here in Showtime.
Yes.
And I'll probably just well, I'll have my ways of watching it. But on the card, we can also check out Joe Joyce will be taking on Romain Stavern. Lee Selby will also be taking on Wilmington, Delaware's own Omar Douglas. I'm rooting for you, buddy Douglas there. I actually think he may be able to do some work there and actually could possibly start an upset there. So
your thoughts, George, because I just finished talking about this on my podcast this week. Your thoughts on DeGale and Eubank Jr. Can Eubank actually fight an intelligent fight for once?
No.
Can Eubank, fight an intelligent fight? Can DeGale, does he have enough in the tank?
To answer your Eubank Jr. question, is he intelligent enough to fight a disciplined fight? No, absolutely not. He is, and he's what Ring IQ calls the UK Wilder.
Wow.
Where he's very. I mean, here's the problem with what people get caught up with Chris Eubank Jr. I think what people did in the beginning, I think not so much. Some of the UK fans are kind of found him out. Is that just athletic ability doesn't get you solely by in boxing. You can hit that punch combo machine as many times and as fast as you want. But that boxer ain't always going to be sitting there, and he's always benefited from guys who just came right at him. So the first time he actually put a guy who actually learned how to box in George Groves, it was a fucking masterclass. And it was just shown just levels of just what he really is missing as an actual fighter. And that's shown again, even with even beforehand with Saunders. Credit now both. I mean, Saunders again is at least pretty elite at the division at the time, but still, I mean, George Groves still somewhat on the downturn with that. I mean, and fought the last round with a broken arm, which Junior couldn't really do much about. And really, just for that, look, you're kind of asking the wrong guy about Junior, because I've always called him a hype job from the jump, and even when he was getting his knockouts. People were calling him a power puncher. I never call him of the such. I never said he really had much power, because all of his knockouts were stoppages. They were accumulative punches. He never necessarily put one guy out with just one punch. Seldomly ever. If anything, his most famous stoppage against Nick Blackwell was the accumulation that guy took. Was the fact that he stood up to all of Junior's punches throughout the fight.
Yeah.
And I think the only reason what makes this any reason, or at least any type of a competition in a fight, is James DeGale. And it's James DeGale because it's a matter of how much he's dropped off. And for me, I feel like James DeGale, I mean, he had that one really bad showing, which I guess for some people will feel like that's that for that one fight then and there is the reason they think he actually just loses. Now, I mean, with a solid head on his shoulders and a good camp, in the bag. I feel like he can really do this one over, and even with the DeGale down 2 pegs, is still levels above Chris Eubank Jr.
And one more question, because I don't know the next time I'll be on the show. I've been asked about this by a couple of casuals. This particular fight, your thoughts on Errol Spence and Mikey Garcia, because I've heard those who are serious about this sport as us, discussion wise, giving Mikey Garcia a really good shot here. They think he can pull off the upset.
Well, I mean, I guess those are more hopeful people of our fraternity. I like both fighters, and I it was more. I think it was really unfortunate the fact that this even ended up happening in the first place, because there's definitely other fighters there for Spence to you really tango with. So you're kind of wondering why in the first place. Yeah, and not even so. I mean, we can well, yeah, you can say Thurman. I'd say there's a more logistically easy one. And then you have Crawford, who I feel like is that's the fight that needs to really decide the division. But that'll be some time, and of course with the network Cold War II that we were already discussing on may play a part in that too. But at least back to the fight, Mikey Garcia. I mean, skillful fighter. I mean, enough though to overcome Errol Spence that is going to be coming in hefty. He's a weight bully already for the weight as is, and with the weight advantage that he was already going to have just being naturally the bigger guy, and for that reason you can't help but not take the size in consideration. I don't care who it is. I mean, there's just countless times in this sport over and over and over again where it's little guy just no matter how good he was, because eventually just gets overcome by the bigger dude, especially if he's a power puncher, unless you're Manny Pacquiao, of course. But I'm thinking of Conway versus Lewis. You know what I mean? That guy, Conway, boxed a perfect fight the whole fight until the last round and got caught with the one right hand, ended everything. And you consider, really, that can literally be the story that plays out for Mikey Garcia. I mean, and it's undeniable with the power that Errol Spence brings. I mean, it's you got to be pretty much a family member of Mikey Garcia to be in the denial that the fact that you don't think he'll at least may get hurt in this fight. And with that being said, I don't see how Mikey wins this fight, unless Spence does something erratic in there that just totally where he loses the plot or something. I mean, yeah, it would have to be a total meltdown on Spence's behalf for him to lose that.
Yeah, Garcia has the technical skill and the intelligence to give Spence trouble. My problem is he doesn't have the athleticism to stay out of Spence's way.
Mm-hmm. And that's the thing. That's what makes it inevitable, is that it's coming. You can box all you want. You can jab and pivot and do all of that nicely, whatever. But that he's still coming.
And what the other thing is, one, that other people are not talking about. One, Garcia, I'm convinced, has a sensitive nose. It's been broken before.
Mm-hmm.
Two, if this dude can get knocked down at 126 and 130 pounds,
yeah,
what happens when Spence really cracks this guy at 147?
And it ain't no flash knockdown where you just get popped on your butt and you just sat back up and you're gonna just ride that 8 count real fast.
Right.
You know what I mean? This is some thudding shit that may actually levitate him.
Right.
Especially, right. I'm just especially those body punches. I'm already just thinking about that. You know he's gonna
Yeah.
be digging those. So
Yeah, and apparently Mikey has never really gotten to shape for a fight. It's a daunting task to get into shape against a guy that's physically strong.
yeah, man. Yeah, and good luck with that. Yeah, good luck with trying to do that for the first time at that too.
Yeah.
So
yeah, those were my main questions for you. Yeah.
all right, man. But yeah, I mean that was that was a lot of fun, man. I should definitely have you gotta have you back sometime soon, man. We went probably about a half hour longer than we typically do, but that always means at least it's
Yeah,
a good indicator of good conversations.
Joshua, yeah, that's Joshua. Like I said, we have to have another discussion, maybe in another platform, but yeah, another discussion needs to really be made about that in order for me to say
Absolutely.
what's really on my mind. Because I
Absolutely.
could go there, but
Hey, look,
I'm not
man.
saying I'm the most popular podcast out there. I'm far from that, but I could really tick some folks off and call some folks out.
Oh yeah, and it's too easy to be done. And you know, speaking of platforms, my man, go ahead and just go ahead and you can do some shameless plugging if you need.
Oh yeah, Pound for Pound Boxing Report, YouTube show, podcast, blog. We discuss all things boxing. You want to find information regarding Pound for Pound Boxing Report, the blog page is the place to go to. I got a WordPress blog, p4pboxingreport.wordpress, excuse me, .com. On the blog, you look to the right of the blog page, you will find all the information, where to find us on social media, where to find us on available platforms that carry podcasts. We're not on Spotify yet, but for the UK folks out there, we are on Player FM, and let donation be the best nation. Got a PayPal and Cash Me app if you want to donate 50 cents, $1, $2, $5, how big or how small, I don't care what it is. And if you want to check me out and talk boxing, music, fitness, Brother JR at Brother JR on Twitter.
All right, that's right. Donation instead of proclamation of the nation of the domination. You know exactly who's out there looking for that shit.
Yeah.
You know? So leave all that shit alone. Definitely have the platforms to speak on it. We can talk about that maybe on a different segment on my channel here. But definitely, again, always welcome anytime, Mike. Good to have you on. Again, great to have you guys.
Excuse me, one more thing as an aside, you can also find some of my work on 3kingsboxing.com, where I'm a regular contributor there as well.
Yeah, shout out to Three Kings Boxing, man. They're definitely doing their thing too. I see definitely stepping up the game in a lot of their reporting and just getting it out there too. It's always good to see it out there. You know, really on the dime too, especially with some of the events over the past week. That's you got to keep it up by the hour. So again, and I thank you everyone for listening in. It was great to have you in for this week, next week, and in the future. Click subscribe, share, comment, debate, and we'll be here next week. Peace.